So, welcome. Thanks for joining us, those of you that are online already. I'm Lee Biggenden. I'm the co-founder of Nephos Technologies, joined today by James Norman, who's the engineering manager from Storage Made Easy, or SME, as they're probably going to be referred to because it's shorter. Thanks for joining us, James. We're going to be speaking to you today about SME's file fabric platform and how that's used really to support remote file access without the need for people to migrate data to the cloud or mass movement of data, or without big capital investment and need to change workflow and all this good stuff, which James will explain. In terms of content, what we're covering off today, I'm going to give you a quick intro to Nephos, who we are, what we do. We're going to touch on the remote file access challenge. So, you know, what's the problem, basically. I'm going to kick over to James. James is going to go through a bit of an overview on Storage Made Easy and the file fabric and a quick demo for you. And then we're going to close out with some Q&A, should you have any. So, starting with us and Nephos, who are we? I know some of you already know us, but for those that don't, we're a consultancy-led data services integrator. So our role really is to help our customers to solve complex data problems. So that could be anything from how do we process genomic data faster to how do we create platforms to share media content across the globe, or secure our content in Azure and AWS, and anywhere in between, really. We're a privately held UK organisation and running for 8 years now, actually, and actually we've been pretty successful in our approach. So we've seen on average 120% revenue growth year on year. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that actually we execute on what we promise, and we focus on one thing. You know, we focus on data and helping our customers to better store, process, protect that data. It's kind of what we do. We're not an all things to all men company in that sense. And we came to market really because we felt there was a lack of support for customers that wanted to leverage their data more effectively. A lot of organizations were really, a lot of the kind of channel partners, if you like, or the reseller partners that organizations work with, were very, very much focused on churn and kind of maintaining legacy tech debt, I would suggest. And a lot of what we were seeing from customers was that actually there was a desire to innovate and do things differently in most of them, but their current partners weren't really adding a lot of value to that. So they were left on their own to go and find new tech and make use of it. But that's really, really difficult when you're trying to run BAU at the same time, right? It's a really, really big challenge for people to balance those things. And there was, generally speaking, a lack of independent expertise out there around new tech in particular, and that's kind of where we focus in on. We're not the people that you go to buy a Cisco switch or a HP server. Yeah, it's kind of, generally speaking, not our area of expertise. What we look for is those more transformational programs, in whatever size and shape that is, where we can really add some value to our client. And really for those customers that are looking for that expert help to guide them through that journey, right? Over the course of the last kind of 8 years, we've built out our own data framework, in essence. So this really describes some of the core areas of expertise in which we work, right? So starting at the bottom, and this is kind of where the SME piece comes into play: data processing and storage. You know, this is all about delivering new, innovative ways for our customers to improve the way they store, manage, process data. Could be any type of data. It could be media content. Could be CAD files. It could be genomic sequencing data. We have worked in every single one of those spaces, and really, it's all about driving increased performance at lower cost and more efficiently, and leveraging new technology sets to do that. We also are doing more and more work in the security and compliance space. So this is really all around bringing some sort of some data science really to data governance. So giving customers the ability to get a full 360-degree view of their data, regardless of where it is, what it is, and then being able to apply some policy enforcement to those things, all in one place. And the last component part of that is around this analytics and data management perspective. So, you know, this is kind of your AI, machine learning, deep learning type platform. So how do we automate data science? How do we put platforms in place that enable data science and enable value from our data, or drive value from our data, shall we say? And as I mentioned at the top, we are consultancy led in that approach. So we have a number of kind of pre-developed services, if you like, engagement services that are really geared up to help our customers to transition from where they are now to where they want to be when it comes to data. How do we provide that independent expertise and guidance around delivering new platforms that are data focused? And that ranges anything from, you know, things like smart discovery, which is really all about bringing visibility into risk when it comes to your data, to, you know, cloud strategy. How do we migrate services into the cloud? What should we migrate? Where should we migrate them? You know, that kind of strategic direction in that sense, all the way through to our smart file and smart data object platforms and services. And these are all about getting better understanding into the profile of your data sets, understanding how we can leverage things like object storage to drive efficiencies in that space. And then we have a delivery component, which is our data migration services. And really that's about once we've established a strategy and we've provided the platforms that we're talking about, that's all about helping our customers to migrate that data into those platforms. And we've been pretty successful in doing that over the last 8 years. We have you know, everyone's got a vanity slide, right? We have a range of customers in a number of different markets, whether that's someone like Genomics England, for example, where we manage over 65 petabytes worth of genomic sequencing data. We've rebuilt the strategy for them for storage for the next 5 years. We then delivered it, and now we operationally manage it for them. Whether that's someone like CMC, where we're working with them to drive more value from their data from an analytics perspective, or the likes of WSP in the engineering space, where we've delivered our Smart Edge services, which is all about driving consistent delivery and performance of infrastructure at the edge of the environment. So, you know, delivering centralized shared storage, providing global file systems out to remote locations, that kind of thing. So we have a very, very broad mix there in terms of customer base across most vertical markets. The thing that binds them all is data. You know, it comes back to that. How do we store it? How do we process it? How do we protect it more effectively? And that's really what we do. In today's context, for this particular webinar, what we're honing in on is this remote file access issue. Now, we're running a number of webinars over the coming weeks and weeks past, specifically focusing in on some of the challenges that we're seeing when it comes to remote working, remote access, kind of drawn by the wake of COVID, really. We have a number of customers that are expressing challenges there. So these are really an effort to kind of share some of that knowledge and experience and how we might be able to help. When it comes to remote file access, a lot of the challenge is driven by the fact that, you know, people have got pretty straightforward access to file data within the office, right? Some of that might live in things like OneDrive and Dropbox and Box and what have you, that are easily accessible remotely. That it provides some security challenges when you're running a BYOD model, but it's kind of easy to scale and get access to, right? The challenge comes when you try and provide large scale file access remotely to traditional NAS and SAN platforms. Typically SMB in particular is pretty tragic when it comes to performance over a WAN or over the internet. And a lot of our customers are struggling with maintaining performance of those of that access to their remote workers right now. Now, that's a real big problem for people. And the knock-on effect of that is having is that people are quite often being forced to migrate data into the cloud that maybe they didn't want to put there. They have concerns in terms of security in that sense, and equally, drawing the data back once this is hopefully over. One of the other challenges that arises is actually, even to do that on a new platform, whether it's moving into a cloud platform or whatever, takes a lot of time to move data. And when organizations are trying to provide fast remote access that's reliable at scale, and they're having to do it quickly, a large-scale data migration isn't really an option for them. So the combination of those things, the combination of also not wanting large-scale capital investment right now into a new platform, people don't want to make big infrastructure decisions right now when the market and the conditions are so volatile. But it doesn't change the fact that, one, they need to provide access today, and two, that access needs to be consistent moving forward. Because what's quite likely to happen off the back of the CV19 issue is that remote working is going to be way more widespread than it was before. So how do we provide that level of consistent access across any device with no large-scale data migration and with no need to move data into services or that maybe are undesirable? How do we do that? And that's kind of what we're talking about today. And that's really where Storage Made Easy comes in, right? So the SME platform gives us the ability to overlay on traditional storage, or any storage pretty much for that matter, and provide a single pane of glass, a single entry point into our file data from any device. And that's what James is going to be talking to you about next. So James, you are welcome to take control.
Thanks, Lee. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, so thanks Lee for that introduction, and yes, it is a pleasure to be here today, just to present to you all a little bit about Storage Made Easy and our product, the Enterprise File Fabric. As Lee mentioned, I work for Storage Made Easy, and I head up the engineering here. So before we drill into how we can help with secure file access in the context of remote working, let's just take a little bit of a recap about Storage Made Easy. So like Nephos, we're a UK company headquartered here in the UK, but we've also got presences within Europe and the USA as well. And we've been going about 10 years. We shipped our first product in 2010 and were founded in 2009. And the product we're going to speak about today is the Enterprise File Fabric. And as of today, across our books, we have quite a broad portfolio of clients across many different verticals and sectors. That includes clients in sort of government, defense, through to retails, healthcare, media and genomics companies, universities, research institutes, telcos, through to automotive industries, construction, as well as service providers and resellers as well. So we've got a very broad selection of clients using our product with their existing storage platforms, whatever they're using today, across a number of different use cases as well. And we'll drill into some of those use cases later on. So remote working is all the rage at the moment. As with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, it's really become the norm for a lot of workers who are ordinarily at desks in the office. To give an idea of the shift that we've seen in terms of remote working, some statistics published by the Office of National Statistics here in the UK said that from January to December last year, just around 5% of adults in the UK who were working worked from home. Now, as of April 2020, and this has obviously probably shot up more since then, that figure is now 49% of UK working adults are working from home now. So this has been a huge shift change in working from home. Now, longer term, as hopefully the COVID pandemic starts to fade away across the globe, these numbers might start to drop. But what we might expect, and quite reasonably expect, is that certainly the levels in terms of 5%, we're certainly going to continue to see a rise over and above the normal average in terms of people working from home. And to be frankly honest, it hasn't always been easy for everyone working from home. Through the work that we do with a lot of clients and the engagement that we take with a lot of clients, we've spoken to quite a number of them about the challenges that they've had and how they've had to adapt to remote working. One of the biggest shifts that we've seen in terms of how they adapt to remote working is that, for example, they've had to adjust their workflows. They can't access the same tools and systems that they were using in the office. The technology that they've had in place to protect the systems that they have, is at capacity. For example, their VPN services, they just can't take any more traffic over them. And there's many other ways that they've had to adapt these challenges. And these challenges that workers are facing from home and the IT teams having to run these essential services within the organizations has ultimately led to, in certain cases, productivity grinding to a halt, and more worryingly, things like shadow IT within the organization on the rise. Those are really two things that as an organization, we want to critically avoid. So what are organizations doing at the moment with regards to remote working? So in order to address these challenges, there's really been a mixed number of approaches that they're taking to enable their workforce. On one hand, we've seen organizations performing things like en masse migrations to cloud-based consumer services, and others taking approaches like mass-scale VDI deployments for remote staff. On one extreme as well, I've also heard of organizations distributing and posting out hard drives to staff, which is very worrying. And on other hands, people relying on emails for file sharing and collaboration. Things like mass migrations to consumer-based storage services, might tick a few limited use cases, and VDI deployments can help with certain scenarios. However, they're often quite expensive in the long run. They might only be a short-term solution, and they can lock them in the long term. There's also the fact that we're ignoring compliance and security considerations in this as well. And so anything we look to, we have to take these as something we are thinking about front and center when we're evaluating what we can do to enable our workers to work remotely, not only today, but also for the future as well. To understand what they're looking for and what their requirements are driving around this, it's worth having a look at what their objectives are, perhaps in the short term and also in the long term. In terms of in the short term, organizations, particularly at this point, as Lee mentioned, we want to avoid expensive storage migrations. There's talks of a global recession. There's also lots of cutbacks going on within lots of organizations, and so we want to avoid any non-essential expensive outlays in terms of infrastructure. We don't want to have a rip and replace strategy also that introduce extensive risk and extra work for our workers as well in order just to do their jobs. They want consistent, reliable, and security-driven compliance controls wherever their users are working, whether they're working in the office or out of the office. And we want that consistent across the storage platforms that they're using. The solutions they pick have to be really performant for the users working from home and across the range of devices that they're also using, whether that's a Windows machine, a Mac machine, a Linux machine, a web browser, or a mobile phone. It has to work really smoothly and really well for the users to adopt to it as well. And ideally, it also has to adopt to existing infrastructure that they have. They don't want that additional outlay, or it should work on in infrastructure that they can at least easily acquire and get hold of. And most importantly, certainly for me and for a lot of our customers, they want zero lock-in. They don't want to be locked into any solution long-term, and they want to keep the risk low there. Moving on to the longer-term view, we have to think about how the workforce is going to change over time. And as we mentioned, over time we will start seeing workers returning back to the office. Maybe some will still work from home, maybe some will still be in the office. But we have to make sure that whatever solution, whatever thing we put in place, that it supports the fully hybrid model of people in the office and people out the office. And it also has to be fitting with an organization's long-term storage plans as well. So as we talked about at the start, we're here to talk about, how the enterprise file fabric can help to address some of these remote working scenarios. And our product, the enterprise file fabric, which, in our view and many of our customers, is a solution that can meet and exceed many of these challenges that we've outlined and the objectives that organizations have. The enterprise file fabric in itself provides a unified workplace, a single point of access for, with compliance and collaboration for siloed and disparate storage solutions, whether those are today on premise, on the cloud, or a bit of both. The remote employees that will be using this at the end of the day receive the same data protections, whether they're at home, working on their home laptops or a company provisioned laptop, or whether they're sat at their desk in the office behind the corporate firewall. Given the nature of the product as well, the file fabric provides unified security controls across the different data silos, governance and compliance controls that can apply rules and policies consistently, as well as integrations into things like emails, enterprise applications, common protocol access gateways, as well as convenient access wherever they are, whether they want to access through a web browser, whether they want a network drive interface, or whether they just want to access from a mobile application. The file fabric is there for those users wherever they need their access. So what are some of the use cases that the file fabric can help with, specifically in regards with remote working? There's really 3 key use cases that I've picked out here. There's many more that the file fabric can help with, and we can always go through those at a later time, but these are some of the ones specific for remote working. As Lee mentioned at the start, filers, SMB shares, CIF shares are something that pretty much most organizations have these days. They're sat on premise typically, and when users have been in the office, they've been absolutely perfect to work with, local speeds, local access. As users are migrating away from the office, SMB does not work particularly well over the WAN or over the internet. It can be a little bit laggy, and it's also a very chatty protocol. So how can we make those SMB shares more performant, more easy to use for our end users who are working from home? And we can do that with our CIFS-based connectors for SMB shares. These connectors work with the permissions you've already defined on the storage systems, okay? You're not going to have to do a mass migration. It hooks into those storage systems, so users see the files and the folders that they have permissions to see. The file fabric itself handles the SMB communication with the storage platform. And from the user's perspective, the communication with the file fabric service is over our internet optimized APIs, meaning that it's not so chatty, it's not going to potentially stress some of those VPN services that you're trying to run. It also gives you collaboration in real time with colleagues, the ability to share internally and externally if you want to share files with your colleagues or maybe an external supplier. We've obviously got all of those controls within the appliance. And of course, it is really plug and play deployment. And in this really 1-hour webinar, we're actually going to be setting some of this up. There's of course the question of object storage as well. We see a lot of clients moving towards object storage. It's more scalable, perhaps it's cheaper. They want to use it for archive, they want to get access to it. But really there's always been a question with object storage around how do we give end users access to this object storage? And so the file fabric can help bridge that gap between the object storage and the end users by presenting those object storage systems back as file systems for end users. We abstract things like the object storage credentials so that users don't need to know access keys, secret keys. They can sign in with their Active Directory credentials instead. And then admins and managers can assign NTFS-like permissions against those object storage platforms so that users only need to see what they specifically need to see on there. There's also what we've referred to as the transfer, acceleration, and sharing. We need to get files up and down between our different systems, whether that's from a desktop to the storage down to the desktop, or that might even actually be between different storage tiers as well. We need to move those files between them all. given that the file fabric can present a unified single pane of glass interface, we can facilitate that transfer between, say, different storage tiers, whether that's desktop to storage to desktop, or storage to storage. But the file fabric can take that even further with its M-stream transfer acceleration, helping you to move those files potentially across the WAN or the LAN in an accelerated fashion. And that can also be done on policy-based sharing with, say, internal and external parties as well. So before we skip over to the demo, here's sort of a high-level overview architecturally of what the file fabric product looks like. At the very bottom, the file fabric is shipped as a virtual appliance. It deploys into your existing data center infrastructure, whether that's something, say, on-premise, like VMware, Hyper-V, or OpenStack, or Nutanix, or any other pretty much on-premise type hypervisor platform, or it can also be deployed into the public cloud, like into services like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform, or IBM Cloud. It's very flexible where it deploys, and it can scale out to meet your service needs. At the core of the file fabric, we support over 60 different connectors to many different storage platforms. Some of the typical, let's say on-premise type storage platforms like CIFS or SMBs, NetApps, EMCs, Nasuni. We can speak to many of those sort of typical file and block type storage platforms. Whether we're looking at things like object storage, we can speak to, say, some on-premise object storage potentially like Cloudian and Scality, through to on-cloud object storage like Amazon S3 and Microsoft Azure Blob Storage. Or whether we're looking at consumer-grade public cloud services like Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Drive, and Office 365. There's many more outside of this portfolio as well. Like I said, there's up to 60 of these that we support. So we're able to allow you to connect whatever storage platforms you have into the file fabric and see all of those different disparate storage platforms from one single pane of glass. We're not going to duplicate the contents. The files are going to stay where they are. So your files will always live on the storage platform where you designate them to live on. This then brings really three categories, as I like to see it, of functionality and benefits, really. On one hand, we can look at the security and compliance point of view, something really critical to organizations. We have an extensive policy engine that lets admins and managers define how they want their users to use the platform, what functionality is on, what functionality is off. We've got permissions integration, whether that's, for example, our permission integrations with, say, for example, SMB shares and Nasuni shares, where we can understand the permissions on the fly with those platforms, so you don't have to redefine them. It's just plug and play. Whether we're talking about being able to overlay permissions, for example, on, say, platforms where there aren't permissions, like object storage, through to auditing and alerting based off actions that have taken place, through to encryption, like storage level encryption or a blanket policy of encryption, through to compliance health checks, PII, PHI, data discovery engines, through to DLP, and of course, ransomware protection. There's quite an umbrella there of features under our security and compliance. Whether we look at productivity, like really the ability to edit documents wherever you are, whether that's on the web, whether it's on the desktop or the mobile, you can edit your documents in a seamless way. Of course, there's multi-device access. There's search, really critical for any end users. They want to find those documents in their huge collection of unstructured documents. They've got to find that one particular document, whether they want to search in the file name or in the file contents. We've got document previewing. You want to preview with Office Online or preview with a private previewer. There's workflows, approvals. We mentioned the transfer acceleration, bookmarks, favorites, and as well as metadata extraction. Or whether we look at the collaboration, whether that's team drives, for example, or internal, external sharing, real-time discussion, collaboration, document editing, workspaces, as well as looking at Slack and Teams integration, as well as integrations into email clients like Gmail, Outlook, and Mac Mail. All of this is all possible across our seamless access layers, whether you're looking to access your files remotely using Mac, Windows, Linux, whether you're looking to access them from your iOS or your Android devices, whether you're looking to access those, say, from your web browser on any modern popular web browser. We're there wherever the users need us to be, because if we're going to keep the organization secure and compliant, we have to be where the user needs us. This is all topped off as well with our single sign-on integration, integrating into things like Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, as well as SAML-based identity management systems as well. So we can provide that convenient, secure access for end users. So what we're going to do is, in this demonstration, we're going to focus on how easy it really is to plug in the enterprise file fabric into our existing infrastructure, connecting it to our storage platforms, and then providing the secure user access for our end users. So as I mentioned, it's a virtual appliance. It's here deployed within our data center here on the west coast of the US, but I'm actually in London. So this is probably going to be, in terms of latency, probably one of the worst demonstrations I could give, given how far away I am from the deployment. But it'll give you a good sense of how many of the features help string this together for end users who are working far away from the storage. So I'm going to first log in and sign in as what we call the tenant administrator. So this is the account within the system that can manage the users within our organization, can manage some of the settings and the storage platforms that we've got. When we first log in, we're given a nice welcome screen. The admins can extend this. We can put welcome messages for end users, give them the latest COVID news if we want to, and that can also be extended with our widgets integration, allowing you to put into some dynamic content onto these screens as well. So over on the dashboard gives us the overview of our account, and as you can see, we've already got some CIFS-based storage here. This is related to our on-premise CIFS storage, and because we're interested in connecting maybe some different data storage points as well, I'm actually going to connect some object storage in here on this demonstration. So in this case, I've got some Cloudian that's also on-premise. I'm going to click Add Provider. We need to enter the access keys, secret keys for this storage that we have. So I'm just going to do that now. Cool, let me just copy that again. So we're going to enter the access keys, the secret keys, and what we're going to do is we're then going to click Continue. And it's going to ask us which buckets we want to allow the file fabric to connect to. In this case, I'm going to use an existing bucket that I've already got some data in. It doesn't matter to the file fabric whether it's got data in it or whether it hasn't. We work with whatever you have there. And that's key because the file fabric doesn't have any lock-in. Okay, so any data you have is absolutely fine. Data you put in through the file fabric, what you put in is what you're going to get out on the storage. So there's absolutely zero lock-in there in terms of how the file fabric is integrating with your storage platform. So the provider is now what we call synchronized. The file fabric has gone away, had a look at the metadata on the storage, and is keeping that in our metadata model. We're not going to be duplicating any of the storage system over into the file fabric. Your storage stays exactly where it is. So from this side, we've now indexed the metadata, and we can review the settings for this if we want to. So if we were to go back to our dashboard, for example, we will now see in here that we now have two storage systems here on our account. We have some SMBs and we have some Cloudian files as well. In terms of getting our users into this, as we mentioned before, we've got Active Directory and SAML-based integrations. In my case here, I've got the Active Directory connected via LDAP in my case. So this means that my users can sign into this system if they want to get access to the storage. So we've added some storage and we've configured how our users are going to log into this platform. We can see we've already got some users here on this system. So as the admin, I can of course go to the file manager, and as I am the admin right now, we're going to see an elevated view of the file system here. And this is going to change a little bit, obviously, when we log in as a user. But if we go to the root, you'll see now that we see our file shares alongside our Cloudian storage. So the file shares are going to work with the permissions that we have set up there already. But obviously that's not going to be the case with our Cloudian storage. With our Cloudian storage, we can drill into the different folders. Seems like we've got a folder for ISO archives. And I think what we should do is we should make this into what we call a shared team folder. So to do that, we're going to make this into a right click and we convert to shared team folder. This now means that we can manage the permissions on this folder. just like you would in Windows where you make a folder ready for sharing. In our case, we can choose to assign permissions based off, group membership, or we can nominate individual members. In my case, we're just going to pick the IT staff group, and we're feeling generous. We'll give them read and write access to this folder. So we've got our file shares. We've also got our folders, or one of our prefixes in our Cloudian object storage set up for sharing as well. So you've sort of seen how we can mix and match the permissions here. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to now focus on how we do this for end users. So let's log out, because we really want to see this as an end user on this system now. So we're going to log in as one of our IT staff. In this case, Robert Jackson, and these credentials are all coming from the Active Directory domain, meaning that he has to we validate those with Active Directory upon login. Again, he sees the welcome message and he can navigate to the file manager. And from the file manager, you'll notice that we see actually a slightly different view than what the admin saw. This chap, he can only see from the root, he can only see the file shares, which are the SMB shares, and he can also see the ISO archives now. From this user's point of view, he doesn't need to really care that this is object storage on the back end or this is SMB shares on the front end. So he can navigate into these directories, have a look at the directories within here. In this case, he's got access only to the IT and the testing folder. He can go into these different directories that we have here, look at the files we have. We can see, for example, our webinar presentation. If he wants to work with these files from here, if directly from the web browser, we've got integrations with, say, Microsoft Office Online, or we can open this document up locally on our desktop. In my case, I feel like open this up in Office Online. So we open this document up. We can now work on this document directly from our web browser. And it's just going to load now. So we can make the changes directly in here, and these are then persisted back onto whatever storage is on the back end, which is SMB in this case. So what we're going to do is, I think we're going to change this to, we're going to say demo. And you see at the top, it says saving. It says it's saved back to the file fabric. We can now close this window, leave, and that document is now saved. If we wanted to, we could open up a preview here from the right-hand side. And we see now that the file contents have changed. So that's how seamless it is to edit these documents directly from your browser. Again, we could pull this up in our local editor if we wanted to. Again, it's exactly the same, really seamless experience there for the end user, and nothing is proprietary there on the back end. So if we were to go to the storage, it's still a PowerPoint file on the storage, still in the same place. Users can, of course, add files into this storage system. It just works like any other storage platform. We can drag and drop files in here. These are now being uploaded. And actually, as this file is going up, this is a good thing to actually point out at this point. We've actually turned on some of our sensitive data discovery rules here, meaning this file is now going to be scanned as it's moving up to the storage. You notice here it's getting this scanning file. This is going on in the background. Should something sensitive be found in this document, which quite honestly, it looks like it might be, the admins are going to get an alert to tell them there's been some sensitive data discovered on this folder. And we can now see that it's coming back with an alert saying that this file has some sensitive data in it. And we see the matching message at the top of the screen there too. So the admins on this system now have an alert. They can choose to take automated actions based off of this document containing sensitive data. The admins themselves can actually define the rules as well for what is sensitive to them. They could choose to say, we want credit card numbers and bank account numbers, or if it's a GDPR use case, they might want personal information being pulled out, or they can also define their own rules in here too. So they can say, we want to match, Nephos Technologies customer reference numbers, for example. There also aren't any really file restrictions here with the file fabric. We can go into certain directories. Imagine we're an IT user here. We can drag a file up here from our desktop if we want to. For example, in this case, I've got a Debian ISO image. We can just drag and drop straight from our desktop up into the browser. You see it's transferring in what we call our MStream transfer technology. Again, this is going from my home over to the west coast of the USA, peaking there about 22 megabytes per second. Pretty consistent there, being transferred in parallel streams directly from my browser without any browser plugins. And we can see it's tailing off now and it's finished. So we're able to upload that file pretty quickly from London to West Coast USA. And now the file is sitting on our SMB-based storage. If we want to, we can, if we could mount this into our hypervisor, we could do whatever we want to it. We can move or copy this file if it's too big to keep on our primary storage. We could move it over to our ISO archives. Click move, and now this file is going to be transferred in the background over to that storage platform. We can monitor it here from the task screen. We see it's moving the file across. Again, this is doing it with our mStream transfer technology. So as we'll see, it'll suddenly start appearing here in our ISO archives. In just a second, there we go. And now that file has landed on that storage. Because we are presenting this single pane of glass, users can just transparently move data between different storage tiers, just like they were any other folder, say on Windows. When collaborating with colleagues, sharing is often something that is really hard for users to do. And sometimes we might want to share, for example, this ISO image with a user that's outside of our organization. This might be a sensitive document. This might be, a large document that can't fit in within an email. We can share it by URL if we want to. We have the options for putting expirations, limits on access, passwords on those as well. So we can put password on this. As the admin, you can of course define all of these policies that restrict how people do these sharings. We generate links. We can choose to send that link by email too if we wanted to. And of course, we could then send that to the user, put it in an email, and we'll show you how you do that in just a minute. And of course, when the user tries to access, they need to enter the password in order to access that file. As we touched on earlier as well, search is often something that's pretty hard. And this is quite a contrived example, I'll be honest with you here, where we've got quite a small data set. But often the data sets that clients have are very large, and they want to find documents within a very large collection. So, if we're looking for example, any places where we're keeping the Debian images, we can search for Debian, and it'll pull back any files that match Debian. In our case, we've got both the file name and the file content search base going on. So it's finding files matching with the name. We could also search for things like contents within the webinar document, for example. Again, search is happening across the storage portfolio, and all the results are permissions based. So we've been showing quite a bit of the web interface so far. I'm keen to show you now, how this also looks, say, from a desktop point of view. So one of the tools that we have is on Mac, Windows, and Linux. We have a network drive. And so you might be thinking, well, I use a network drive in the office and I use the network drive at home. Okay, maybe it's a bit slower at home. But actually, in our case, the file fabric has a network drive. And as I mentioned before, the file fabric is handling the SMB communication on the back end with, say, SMB shares and other storage platforms on the back end. The network drive that the file fabric provides here is actually using our internet optimized APIs here in order to present these back to end users. But this is really the speed of a local network drive. So here we can access the same SMB or object storage drives that we were just interacting with a minute ago. We can navigate through the file systems, have a look at, say, the IT directory again, double click on files, and now these files just open locally. This is much smoother experience, much faster experience for our end users. And of course, all of these technologies utilize our mStream technology under the hood as well for moving and getting those files down to the users at a much faster speed. We can make changes, we can save and push those back to the storage as well. Seamless, end-to-end for the end users. This also extends, our integrations. We have sync clients if they want to have directories offline for a period of time. Maybe they're going traveling, maybe they're going on site with a client that doesn't have internet connection. We can tune these things for offline access. We also have an Explorer type application for Mac, Windows, Linux as well. That gives them a view into the storage using a standalone application. And of course, we have things like email plugins built for Mac Mail, Gmail, and for Outlook as well, meaning that if the user wants to, here directly from our desktop, we can, from our Outlook client, when we're writing an email to Lee, we can navigate to different directories. We can say share. We can say I want to share the webinar presentation with Lee. I'm going to put a password on it, so Lee has to put the password in. Put an expiration on it of, say, 3 days. Share that with Lee directly here within Microsoft Outlook. Really simple, really secure. No more need to attach, large attachments containing GDPR sensitive data or anything else to these emails. We can share them in place with the file fabric. So, this is sort of a lot of the Windows side of things. Of course, the same experience is there for, Mac and Linux as well. So we provide those end-to-end for the end users. What the other thing that I'd like to show is, for example, the iOS clients, for example. We have iOS and Android clients. Here, this is just my phone. We can navigate into our devices directly, our different shares directly from our phones, opening up different folders as we navigate. We see the same directory structures. We can take the same actions directly here from our devices as well. So we can, we can edit files in place, share them in place, no need to copy them out, move them elsewhere. So we make that really seamless and easy for the end users. Just going back here, just to wrap up really, what we've done so far is we've given access to some storage, we've worked with the storage, we've done transfers between the storage. It's really just been plug and play right here on the demonstration. If we log back in to the tenant admin, one thing I like just to wrap up on really is what we call the policies and the auditing. So if we log in here as the tenant admin, from here, I've been alluding to it. Everything is completely controllable from the admin perspective. So we have an extremely rich policy engine covering all of the options that people might want to turn on and turn off. For example, file sharing policies. Are passwords mandatory? Is a time-based expiry mandatory? Through to, do we want to turn on two-factor authentication for all of our users? And what type of events do we want to audit? Through to encryption. Do we want to use some form of encryption on the files at rest? Do we want to tune some user interface options? What viewers, what editors are we using? Through to, do we want to brand the appliance? Because the whole system can be branded top to bottom to match your organization's logos, making it really nice and really easy to integrate and make your users feel at home. Of course, we touched on the content discovery as well. You saw that in action where the file was being scanned. These are the places where we come to configure our rules. So we've got sensitive banking information rules turned on. We've got lots of templates in here, some for GDPR, PHI, national identifiers, for example. So there's lots of good templates in there for you to work from and extend. You can also add your own detectors in. Through to also what we call our auditing and event logs that are recording every single action that have been happening on this system. So permissions being changed, files being opened, users logging in, logging out, files being locked and unlocked. Everything is completely audited here on the file fabric. These logs are exportable out into common formats, and they're also streamable off onto other systems as well. So if you have log aggregation systems, you can get those logs off in real time to those platforms too. So there's a lot I could show you, but really we focused on really, how we can enable users, and we've spent most of the time as the user, getting secure access to our on-premise storage or maybe on cloud storage too, directly from home at a decent speed without some of the complications that users are having. And as Lee pointed out at the start, also, how can we avoid having to migrate data to other, say, cloud-based storage platforms that are going to lock us in long term? So the key things really are there's no lock-in, it's easy to integrate, and works with all the existing data sources that you have today. And really you can be up and running within an hour. So Lee, I think I'm going to hand back to you at this point.
Great, thank you. One second, I'll swap over. No, thanks for that, James. That's brilliant. So I think just to close things off then, just to recap, and James has kind of covered most of this anyway. I mean, from our perspective, I think some of the challenges that people are facing right now in terms of scaling and consistent delivery of access are some of the biggest challenges, and I think they're some of the core factors in what's driving some of SME success right now. The fact that there's no large-scale migration involved, there's no straight overlay to support access from any device, I think is key right now, and it's common across platforms. So I think James has probably summed that up already, to be fair. So what's next? What can we do next? So in terms of next steps, if it is something that looks like it's of interest for you, there are a number of options. So if you'd like a deeper dive into the platform, into the more technical aspects of it, then we're more than happy to schedule something to do that. We do have some test drive kind of demo POC accounts that you can gain access to, that we can provide you access to, so that you can test it in your own environment. And the last piece is around our smart data storage exercise. So a bit more of a broader discussion, I guess, but more focused on the data sets themselves and how we can help you to understand a little bit more about your data, what you're doing with it, what the profile is, and from there, how best to kind of deal with that moving forward. So there's a number of options there for you. What you will be sent post this is a follow-up email. There is a one-page kind of micro-site up with some resources that you can gain access to in the form of white papers and downloadable content, etc. This webinar will be recorded, has been recorded, and will be uploaded onto it. So if you want to rewatch, you're more than welcome to do so. There's also a button on there to go and take you to the test drive registration page. So you can register to download some of the software and test drive. So a number of options there for you. I think what I'd like to do, aside from thanking you for joining us, is just open the floor quickly to any questions that anyone might have. There's a Q&A questions element that you can submit questions to on the banner. So we'll give that a minute, see if anyone's got any questions that they'd like to fire over. I'm not seeing any currently. So I guess with that in mind, if there aren't any questions on this component part, it's a case of saying thank you again. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully it was useful for you and a good use of your time. And if you do want to rewatch and go over any of the content with us again, then feel free to do so on the follow-up email. James, thank you for joining us. Thanks for taking the time out.
Thank you, Lee, too.
Sorry. Yeah, so I thought it was a question, it's not. But thank you for joining us, and we'll speak soon, no doubt. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, everyone.